I'm Julia Coakley, and on behalf of the MGAA, I'd like to welcome you today to our webinar this afternoon, which is being delivered by AXA Insurance, our MGAA Gold sponsor and Radar. Before I introduce our presenters, I'd just like to run through a few housekeeping points. Please ensure your microphone and your camera is off, and please use the chat button at the bottom of your screen for your questions, which will be answered during the Q&A at the end of the presentation. If we do run out of time and we don't have an opportunity to put your questions to our speakers, these will be answered post-event. This presentation is accredited for CPD hours if relevant to your ongoing professional development. The video will be available on our website and the MGAA YouTube channel, as will the PDF of the PowerPoint presentation. Please also take time to respond to our feedback survey, which will be issued after this event and will enable us to deliver the best quality events to our membership. So today's webinar, Adding Management Liability Policy, MLP, to Your Schemes Business, is being delivered by Chris Elliott, Callum Taylor, UK Technical Director, Financial Lines and Cyber, AXA Insurance, and Gary Gallen, CEO and founder of Radar. Callum is recognised as one of the UK's foremost experts on financial lines and especially management liability risks. With over 30 years' experience, he has developed several customer-focused market-leading insurance solutions. And prior to joining AXA in 2010, Callum held senior roles in various UK and European locations with Hiscox, ACE European Group and AIG. Gary is a trusted legal professional, a technology innovator and a disruptor of the legal market, and is highly respected and a go-to source on the state of the regulatory regime in the UK. Working extensively within both the legal and insurance industries, he forges valuable partnerships and focuses on the issues raised by business risk. Under Gary's leadership, Radar, a legal enterprise with UK and international reach, has become a significant force in both the local and national legal sector, winning numerous sector awards and accolades. And last but not least, Chris Elliott, New Deals Manager. Chris heads up the New Deals team in AXA Schemes and Delegated Authority and is responsible for prospecting for and managing the onboarding of new schemes and delegated authorities. Chris has had a varied career in having been in the insurance industry for nearly a decade. He has worked in various markets, from Lloyd's market in a syndicate to reinsurance market as a broker. So Chris, if I might hand over to you.
Absolutely. So look, just to echo that, welcome everyone. Thank you for giving up your lunch hour to hear us talk about MLP. We've got a really unique offering in this space with our partnership with Radar. We offer genuine customer value. We have experts available to kind of reduce claims at the front end, and we have wide cover as standard. So I'll run you through the learning objectives in just a moment, but just to kind of flag, we'll be at the MGAA conference on the 6th of July if you want to discuss any of this or any other business in detail. So we'll be well represented there as a gold sponsor. So please come over, say hi, and we can kind of talk the specifics of this. Learning objectives from today. I'll quickly run through them, and Callum and Gary will kick off after that to kind of give some flavour to them. Explain how Radar can offer cost savings to MLP policyholders on legal and risk management fees across core business areas. Describe AXA's relationship with Radar and what differentiates AXA MLP. Explain the Radar claims prevention ethos, that's really important. And describe the support available to brokers on the AXA MLP offering. So without further ado, Callum, Gary, do you want to take it from here?
Yes, thank you, Chris, and thank you to everyone joining today. Delighted to be with you for the next 30 to 40 minutes, and I do hope that you take some real value out of that time, because over the last 20 years since I've known Mr. Gallen, I think the two of us share a very, very similar ethos. In fact, I know we share that ethos, that actually preventing claims is much better than reacting after the event. A significant factor in the development of the Radar proposition, and indeed the AXA MLP proposition, is putting your customer absolutely bang at the heart of of what we do, providing advice before they have a claim. Actually, in the event of a claim, being a joined up solution from front end advice to middle market leading coverage to end insurance payment. A percentage of the premium that your customers pay to AXA goes directly to Radar to fund the front end services that you'll hear Gary talk about. And across the insurance market, you will find that services have improved in recent years. But there's a huge differential between insurers in terms of the level and depth of the services that are being offered to customers, and indeed the amount of insurance that is available to customers. Far too often, customers and indeed our insurance broking partners focus on price rather than true value. Could I move on to the next slide, please? Now, this slide you'll see is a blank video at the moment, and we are going to share this video with you after today's session rather than play it today. It's 2 minutes that really do go to the heart of Radar Services, but I think it's much better to hear from Gary directly and then share this with you after the event. So I can quickly flick on to the next slide, please, and just talk about the increasing need for directors and officers in management liability protection. I am sure that you are all aware on this call of the absolute personal reality of in the exposure that your customers face. 96 plus regulators, I actually think it's gone up a little bit since this slide was produced, but 96 plus regulators ranging from health and safety, environmental, tax, employment, industry type regulators such as Ofsted or CQC, all of those have the powers to sanction, fine, or even imprison your customers. Add to that the reality being that most of those regulators target UK businesses rather than the individuals. The sea of red tape, I don't think, has ever been greater. The insurance industry over the last 20 years has evolved from just protecting individuals, and on the next slide I'll talk a little bit around some of the core exposures that your customers face. But it's never been easier to make a claim. If I go back 5 years ago, it used to cost up to £1,200, for example, to bring an employment tribunal. It now costs an ex-employee absolutely nothing. And I'm sure it won't shock you to say that almost 40% of our claims are related to employment matters. Clearly, also the biggest advice area that is taken by our partners at Radar. The other side of things is the reality is out there in a challenging economic climate. Claims, unfortunately, are increasing in certain key areas. Your businesses will contract with others. Unfortunately, that from time to time brings around disputes. Insolvency-related directors' claims. Every time a business becomes insolvent, the liquidator has a legal duty to review the activities that the directors have taken in the run-up to insolvency. And when I say in the run-up to insolvency, that literally can stretch back to as much as 5 years. Gary, anything you would like to add to this slide?
Just to echo some of the things that you've said, Callum. So from the Radar model, we pride ourselves on concentrating on who is that customer or client, and trying to help, looking at the FCA's regulatory agenda and what brokers and MGAs have to do, define the customer. What is that customer? What is that customer's need looking forward to July and the consumer duty? Radar is a business that it can do all of the legal reactive work, which you would expect of panel insurers, clever claims advisors, etc., after the fact. But what we pride ourselves on then, looking at that consumer duty and other things, is helping people actually talk to that prospective policyholder for the new sale or rollover or retention, whatever it may be, and actually helping that client understand its emerging and developing risks, as well as some of the traditional and the existing ones, but then help actually provide information instead of reactively, proactively. And when we're looking at that, some of the extra things that we can contribute to this slide and mention, for example, employment tribunals you mentioned. We get about 6,000 interactions on our proactive front end of the business on an average week of policyholders asking us for guidance and advice proactively, so before there's a claims trigger. It tells us that employment is just under half of all of those calls, so different types of employment issues. We help manage those for the business to stop them becoming a full claim, because if they go to ACAS and they go to the employment tribunal, you are then in the lottery of when that case may be heard, and the issues then attaching to investigating that, taking statements, complying with processes and procedures, and getting battle ready for tribunal. Now, if you're down in the southeast, the average time delay now to get a case to a tribunal is 2 to 2.5 years. If you're in West Yorkshire, it's 6 to 12 months. But you're going to go past renewals, you're going to be incurring costs, and you're taking up time and energy out of the business to be able to prepare everything to get ready for that tribunal. And then you're in the system waiting for the case to be heard. There's going to be more cost to refresh that evidence, check the witnesses are still employees, deal with any changes of circumstances, etc. Has a witness had a problem with the business for performance or something like that, so that then case preparation needs to be revisited and changed. So if your policyholders actually get issues like this, then there's the dynamics of, once you're in that legal framework and that system, what are the alternatives to waiting to full tribunal? What's the mediated processes? What's the litigation? And the steps that could be taken to deal with that matter effectively. But more importantly, as I say, proactively stop it getting to the tribunal stage at all, because of all of those costs, distractions, anxieties, time and effort that is taking up then dealing with cases. So that's employment. And what I can say is employment tribunal cases across the whole of the United Kingdom are increasing. Also, speculative employment cases, where we're seeing the kitchen sink, as it were, from certain lawyers. Callum's touched upon the fact that you can file the tribunal claim without at no cost. We are seeing multiple grounds of harassment, discriminations, several different grounds all being conflated together, which means that when those employee grievances and disputes and internal disciplinary and performance management, sickness, absence, flexible working request cases, they are all increasing. So the effectiveness with which to try and get to those quickly and proactively with a client to mediate and try and deal with settlement agreements, etc., is important. So disputes in the workplace and people management are increasing, Callum. You've touched on insolvency, and you mentioned a time limit. Actually, increasingly with pre-PAX, insolvencies, debt, and for the last 18 months, each quarter consecutively, there have been more corporate insolvencies, personal bankruptcies, and IVAs than the previous quarter. So it is an accelerating trend that people are not able to afford to look at the cost of living, supply chain increases, employee costs of wages, etc. So there is an increasing trend and a lot of people out there touting these quick fix solutions to crash the company, get rid of the debts and Phoenix up. That's increasingly looked at by the taxman as incidents of fraud. And so there is no time limit. That pierces the corporate veil. It follows people, and insolvency doesn't mean anything because it's ignored as if it didn't happen, and they go straight after the individuals. That is an accelerating and increasing trend. It's one of the key things as well as to why, as the MLP, we do deal with the criminal tax investigations, self-reporting tax investigations, the things actually that none of our competitors have our type of radar service, so they can't contend with it. But debt recovery, lease and landlord disputes, dilapidations, costs of trying to reconfigure your operational costs, etc., they're also increasing. Finally, as well, health and safety road traffic. They're also increasing. So the traffic commissioner is getting more involved. There's more technical cases. There's more involved cases for the operation of HGVs, passenger service vehicles, etc. There's a lot more scrutiny taking place there. And it's a little bit of a sign that some of the compliance is slipping. Overloading, etc., and things like that is creeping in and becoming an issue. So both the local authority and the health and safety executive are doing a lot more work on the health and safety now as we're emerging back out of COVID and everybody's stepping the businesses up. So I think, to your point, Callum, there are just over 163 regulators across the United Kingdom with power of investigation, sanction and enforcement. So that's a civil fine, loss of a professional license or a kite mark or an operational certificate for an organisation or for an individual to trade and perform a business, as well as the criminal code as well. So that professional conduct, regulatory, business compliance, civil and criminal code, those four areas are gathering pace. So there is a lot there for businesses to contend with, and we're seeing a lot of calls and a lot of engagement across those areas. Others as well, but they're probably the biggest trends, I think, Callum. If that helps you with the comments that you passed about the regulators and the increasing issues business owners are facing.
It absolutely does, and I'll just pick up on one point that you made there, Gary, and that is the 6,000 calls on HR related and other matters per week. So over 300,000 interactions that AXA customers have with Radar every year. Less than 1% of those interactions ever go on to become a claim. And remembering this is where your customers, they have a problem when they're contacting Radar. They're not phoning for a nice chat. Yeah, they are in a situation, whether it's contract, whether it's HR, whether it's regulation, that they need help. So actually preventing that becoming a claim, because money's important, don't get me wrong. We all like to have the financial aspects, but I go back to that whole raison d'etre of the development of the MLP policy. If you can prevent the emotional damage, emotional distress, the time, Gary's alluded to it, 12 months plus average employment tribunal, for example, internal strife amongst the business, because if you have an ex-employee that is alleging a whole manner of different allegations of discrimination or harassment, what does that do to the current workforce? And of course, competition. Will they seize on the fact that that business and its leaders are perhaps slightly distracted from their day-to-day role? So which moves me nicely on, if I can move on to the next slide, please, just in terms of the coverage that is afforded to your customers under AXA MLP policy. And I'll touch on certain things that are industry-wide and certain aspects that are very much specific to AXA and Radar under the MLP policy. Radar service is unparalleled, and I'll let Gary, I'm sure that he'll be delighted over that once I finish this slide to go into the detail of Radar. But touching on the insurance contract for a start, it's predicated on the basis of directors and officers liability cover. So the personal liability that attaches to individuals running a business. But it's not just those running a business. Insured persons goes right down to each and every person operating in any UK business. Why do I say that? Well, I go back to that regulatory slide. Health and safety, for example. Each and every one of us have a duty to our fellow employees and indeed to members of the public. So if we cause an accident or serious injury to another party, we could literally face time inside. Yeah? So that's the pointy end of personal liability. And I like to split D&O down into two categories. Firstly, I could go on about the Companies Act and all the definition to act in the best interests of the company for the benefit of its members as a whole. But what exactly does that mean? Thinking about it, it's two things. One, things that cost others money. Yeah. So have you had a shareholder dispute? If you think about most UK businesses, they're SMEs, aren't they? They're run by family, friends and individuals and entrepreneurs. Families never fall out, do they? Friends never fall out. You can dress it up as unfair prejudice claims and have the absolute technical aspect of it. But at the end of the day, it's a boardroom fallout where somebody is alleging they have lost money and have involved lawyers to resolve that issue for them. So the civil aspects, shareholders, investors, contract issues relating to individuals, libel and slander, insolvency related creditor claims, i.e. you've hidden that money and now I have been left holding the baby. I've been left losing hundreds of thousands of pounds and I'm going to hold you personally responsible because I can see 6, 12, 18, 24 months ago that you've paid huge dividends out of the company. And then, as I say, the more pointy end, the regulatory or even criminal sanctions that individuals can face from health and safety, environmental, tax, industry-related matters. So D&O, really, really important to protect the personal liability of individuals. But the reality is, under this policy, most claims don't fit under that section. Really important to protect those individuals, but only 10 to 15% of claims that we see over a 10-year period fit against individuals. I mentioned earlier, almost 40% are employment related. Yeah? So the unfair dismissal, harassment or discrimination of any kind, whether it's sex, race, disability, these claims, unfortunately, have increased substantially over the last 5 years. So almost 250,000 tribunals brought in the UK on average over the last 3 to 4 years. Quite uniquely within the AXA MLP policy, because generally you look across the insurance marketplace on management liability, you will see excess levels ranging anything from £5,000 right up to £25,000 as standard for small SMEs. Uniquely within the AXA policy, we offer an excess from only £1,000 where radar's advice is followed. So we want customers, we encourage customers, really want you to take the advice, because we know, going back to my 300,000 plus interactions per year, less than 1% ever going on to become a claim. That's when the policy really works. When we engage with the customer, we help them do the right thing. We cut down on the emotional distress, the time, the damage, the PR. Okay, so employment and D&O, really important parts. So 50 to 55% of claims. Actually, the largest area is in the third area. And this is, I'm going to call other company claims. We called it corporate legal liability, but it's basically claims that are made, whether they're civil, again, or regulatory or criminal, or indeed fraud, brought against the company itself. Because going back to that regulatory side of things, if I'm the tax man, if I'm the health and safety executive, if I'm the environment agency, if I'm Ofsted, if I'm CQC, when I think there's a problem, I don't immediately go after the individual director, or it's rare that I go after the individual director. I will start by launching an investigation into the company. And in many cases, I will conclude by a prosecution solely against the company. Even in health and safety matters, I might not even go full the way to prosecution. I might enforce things like fees for intervention, avoid a prosecution by the company admitting that there has been a breach of health and safety duty, agreeing to put things right, and agreeing to pay the time and the costs of the health and safety in bringing that investigation. Yeah. So regulatory part, sea of red tape, numerous SME surveys have always highlighted the amount of red tape, even post-Brexit, that the UK SME and larger corporates have to follow. So really, really important area of coverage. And unfortunately, in this area, not all policies are the same. Quite a lot of the D&O and management liability policies in the marketplace will restrict in areas, whether it be data, they'll restrict in areas, whether it be not doing anything beyond health and safety. They will only cover prosecutions and not investigations being the main part of the interaction of the policy. AXA's MLP and Radar service covers all regulatory advice, investigation, and if things get to that worst point, all types of regulatory prosecution. So really, really big area. If I was to go through the number in terms of percentage-wise, employment top, regulation number 2. Number 3 is contract. I mentioned in terms of the current economic conditions, and regretfully, contract disputes are definitely on the increase. Companies don't want to pay. They find a way of arguing that service hasn't quite been as was contracted to. And not only do we defend contractual obligations, so when an allegation is brought against our customer for failure to fulfill their contract, we offer pursuit against third parties for failing to do their contractual obligations, both from contract, debt recovery, and that pursuit coverage even goes on to things like property dispute and restrictive covenants. Beyond that, the management liability policy does cover a wide range of other areas, such as data leaks, such as pollution, such as internal and external fraud. But if I'm being honest with you, if I go through employment, regulation, contract and individual D&O claims, they would account for 85, 90% plus of the claims that AXA and Radar see every year. So the other areas are nice to haves, but the reality is sticking to those core and absolutely ensuring that your customers are fully aware of their obligations there is absolutely critical. Gary, anything you would like to add to what I've said there?
Just a few bits, I suppose, to support what you're saying there, and a couple of points, I suppose, to note for context. A decade ago, before AXA entered this financial line space with this MLP product underwritten by AXA, authored by Callum, and the Radar service authored by myself, and bringing these solutions together, it must be remembered that AXA had no financial lines product in this space. So it was a gap in the product suite, as it were, for AXA. So when we built this solution to enter the market, we knew that it had to be something that was different, something that offered solutions that other existing products didn't. So Callum's talked about directors and officers. They were still back then too much about the office holders and certain levels of support in the business. So our extension of directors and officers actually covers all of the employees too. Because as a former regulator myself, and from having prosecuted, investigated and defended here and abroad for, I'm over 30 years now in the regulatory profession, that if you don't look after the people that are at the coalface, that are carrying out the job and carrying out the work, that's where actually control over the case, prosecutions of the company, wrong advice, lack of control over evidence and information can cause massive problems actually for the policyholder and the management team of the business if you're not looking after the employees. So with AXA not being in the space, what we took was years and years of our experience to look at the existing covers and bring them into one space. So there is that directors and officers liability, there is that employment practices, and critically, I can't underestimate for you or reinforce what Callum said about the corporate cover. Because regulators, nasty regulators like I used to be, I would investigate, but I would come at the organisation first. I would come at the charity, I would come at the school, I would come at the construction company. It would be the business that I would seek to investigate all the activities of that business. Now, in so doing, I'm gathering all of the necessary evidence that individuals have created in carrying out the activities for the organisation. So if you don't protect the corporate, the information then becomes surfaced and available to the regulators to then trigger the D&O and put the directors and officers insurance at risk. But that's reactively, that's after the fact. So something else that Callum mentioned, to bring this product into sharp focus, I was an equity partner at the world's largest law firm doing this work at hundreds and thousands of pounds per hour for myself and my team. The commitment for me was to resign and build Radar from the ground up in the special way that it works, to work in these solutions, but it was on the basis also that the product had to be truly different, offer a proper joined up solution to policyholders, and it had to cover all regulators, all investigations, and all prosecutions. And we entered the market on that basis, and we are still the only market that is offering that solution. And certainly some of our existing MGA partners who distribute the product and brokers have pointed out in one of our biggest rival products that they offer a difference in cover and a difference in limits and a price match to every solution in the market except this one, which tells us everything that we need to know about the differentiators still in this product. But for the audience here, it's really important that those issues are understood and the importance of those features when we're looking at consumer duty, when we're looking at the dynamic and overlapping and fast pace of change that is coming at organisations. Nobody would have anticipated that the pandemic would have been as long and as painful and as difficult for organisations to go through, but it's thrown up digital transformation and all of the issues that come along that for organisations to try and source technology, what technology, change their operating model, find partners to provide them with digital solutions. And then there's regulatory issues attached to that, data protection, information security, cyber liability risks. Call it remote working, call it hybrid working, call it home working, but then managing the dispersed workforce in often different jurisdictions, let alone just around the United Kingdom. But flexible working requests, people that want wage increases, understandably, but not to return to the culture of the workplace where new employees need to be trained and brought on to understand the working practices of the business. There's that mismatch going on within organisations. So we have phone call after phone call every minute of the day about those duties and obligations about return of the workforce to try and grow the business, the culture, the diversification, the collaboration, the training that's needed of the younger and emerging employees in organisations. Throws up all sorts of problems for businesses. So we very much are a business that's been built on building a product that is truly unique and different, but it's ruthlessly focused on the business, the people that need the help. What is it that they are wrestling with? How can we define that for them, raise education and awareness, and provide what we call very early upstream education, risk registers, advice and guidance, and then management through problems when they ring us, when they live chat us, when they're downloading templates, doing online e-learning, etc. That data, and often people talk about data, but that practical data that we can see, of what are micro businesses struggling with and what are they needing help with? What are small, medium, large or very large corporates struggling with and needing help with proactively? How often? With what severity? How many legal issues are overlapping? That helps define more and more proactive services, because the success of the product, and I saw interestingly enough this morning, 2 reports saying that Allianz and Zurich, for example, are not seeing a significant rise in sales of D&O products. In the first quarter of this year, we saw a 38% increase in sales of MLP. So year on year, we are still seeing very strong growth. All the feedback that we get from the policyholders and the distribution partners is the key is the success of that proactive element and preventing the claim, or if there is the emerging claim, that we're fast and smart at managing it away. And even if it does become a claim, as Callum said, that 1% that becomes a claim, to be faster, smarter and quicker at working with the client to compromise or defend that claim. If it needs to be defended, we'll defend it to the hilt and deal with the claim effectively. That's what allows us to work with AXA and say, extend the policy cover. As new and emerging risks come out, we always extend the policy. We've moved it in the last 10 years for rewrites to extend the coverage and the offers and the support to the businesses. And as Callum said, market leading reductions of excess that other people are unable to do. That's because the policy is successful, because we're helping businesses. And so through that, we will work really closely with MGAs and our distribution partners to help look at the types of policyholders that they've got that they're talking to. So if it's a haulage business, then we'll talk about the traffic commissioner. We'll talk about the duties and responsibilities of operating an O licence, passenger service, etc. They don't want a website. They don't want piecemeal telephone services, a bit of consultancy, a risk assessment and a method statement piecemeal. They need a holistic solution, and I think that's what's key to the ingredients here. We provide that holistic end-to-end solution. But we will talk to a care home about care home risks, about medical records, dispensing medicines, etc., terminal end of life care if it's that type of a care home, multi-site distributed, managing different locations, or single site organizations. Advice needs to be tailored to the policyholder. Vanilla and generic does not work. And certainly with Brexit, with four chancellors of the exchequer and 3 prime ministers in a short space of time last year, and economic chaos that ensued, those pressures on business are significant. So actually we find a lot of what we're doing is very much, in effect, sort of counselling and supporting and helping business understand the series of decisions that they have to make and helping them managing through those decisions to avoid the claim in the first place. So that is key to the solution. So all of those points that Callum talks about, it is the widest cover. If there's a guilty plea, we recommend a guilty plea and we stay in. We don't exit like other policies do. So any admission or finding of guilt, you might be aware there's still a lot of competitors then that don't offer cover from that point. If that's the right thing to do, we don't abandon the client and we work with the client. Self-reporting on tax, self-reporting on competition to avoid full investigations and prosecutions. Unique areas of cover that, from what Callum and I have touched on in terms of tax investigations, for example, is actually mission critical. Although we've mentioned a lot of regulators, it's actually the taxman and the multidisciplinary regulatory powers of local authorities that are the most widely used and touch more micro, small and SME clients than a lot of those other big regulators that tend to get the headlines more when they move on things. But those visits, those targeted investigations by trading standards, those health and safety powers of the local authority, we're seeing being exercised more and more and more. But the key is that education and awareness to allow cover areas that nobody can offer, but it's the access to the early intervention and the advice that is the key to the success, and tailoring it. And on that word tailor, I'll pass it back to you, Callum. Nice segue back to you.
Lovely, thank you, Gary. And that wasn't lost on me. So having over 100,000 customers in the AXA MLP space, Gary has hugely touched on it in terms of our appetite. So we have facilities with partners ranging from clubs, care homes, construction contractors, right across the space. So huge appetite, ranging from premiums from literally less than £100 through to many tens of thousands of pounds for large corporates. So really, really large appetite, and clearly very, very keen to speak to each and everyone on this call and see if there's a solution that we can offer for you in this space. Now, next couple of slides, Gary, are really just highlighting the radar service. We've touched hugely on it. There's just a couple of slides just have some high-level detail.
Sure, and I think we're at the sort of like at the tail end of the chat, so I'll race through these, Callum. But what I would say is anybody that's online that actually wants a demonstration of the system or to talk to me, our sales director, our commercial director, any of the demonstration team to actually see the technology solutions, etc. Because certainly what I found, the video will be useful for people to watch and look at later. But actually having a demonstration or presentation brings it much more to life, and we know that our distribution partners say they understand it much more, and it's much more effective for them to describe it and use it once they've had a demonstration. So please do email me after this. Please do ask if you want a visit, if you want a demonstration. More than happy to demonstrate what the system can do. But a couple of quick points then to touch on these issues. We are 24/7, 365. Accidents and problems don't happen in nice Monday to Fridays 9 till 5s. So we example, there was the M1 fatality a few years ago with the minibus that was crashed and a hit between two HGV vehicles. I'm still a practicing solicitor. That was my Saturday morning call out. So that was the crisis call. That was me going to scene, managing the scene, working with our haulage clients at cab audio and video, then working with the police and the investigations, etc. So what you get in that response is qualified solicitors that do the police stations work, do the tribunal work, take statements, know the integrity of evidence, turn up and actually are the advocates in the courtroom. So very unlike a lot of competitor solutions where when that happens, it's a panel law firm that's not dealt with the client before, doesn't know anybody, that's got to try and find all of that out. We have that complete education, training, awareness, how to sell the product, particularize it, embed it with the client. We give the advice, but we also give the technology for that business to deploy and use that advice. But it's all covered by legal privilege, which means that when they're asking for advice on employment matters, health and safety matters, GDPR data protection, again, unlike most competitor solutions, those advisors are consultants and niche in some areas. All that advice, however, is unprotected if it's not given by a lawyer. So actually it can expose the policyholder and the broker at risk to negligence and at risk to claims if you don't protect that advice. Because let's be open, businesses don't know what they don't know. So unfortunately, a lot of the time when they have the crisis and the problem, they don't know how to manage it, and they don't know that they may have had a breach or a problem. So keeping things under legal privilege is really important, and that round-the-clock support. But it's all in one place. There's no subcontracting. So the advice that clients need, we deliver it. But because in my 32-year career, I found that advising one or two people in the company, the problem is they don't know how to train that and deliver it and give it to the company. So they get the advice, the technology is ours, we deliver the training, we give them the proactive advice, we manage in the midstream when there's an emerging problem still to divert it, and the full claim service legally privileged, all under one roof. So again, turning to that consumer duty, for account executives, for brokers to explain, to look at the channel and the chain of value and who does what. Very easy to articulate, very simple to comply with regulatory considerations and demands, and very easy for account executives in those important few minutes they've got to talk to people to explain this solution in a much more joined up fashion. So hopefully from that you can understand that we're very much in tune with our distribution and MGA partners and very much looking to work collaboratively. And I think you'll agree, Callum, that AXA doesn't need to be in the room to explain the solution and what we do. We're quite happy for you to contact us. We work in complete trust and harmony with AXA in relation to this, but it's you as the MGA partners, the distribution partners, that we need to be talking to look at the markets that you're attacking, the work that you would like to win, the work that you would like to retain. So we're happy to have an active conversation with you about how we can tailor content and solutions to help you.
You've used that word tailor a number of times, but yes, I would completely agree with you that we absolutely don't need to be in the room. The key that we have with our MGA partners is actually understanding what is your niche. If there is, or are you general? We don't mind. We can find a solution that works from the small MGA partner right through to the quite sizable schemes and delegated authorities that we have. The application, one of the questions coming through before today was, how easy is it to get a D&O or management liability solution? Well, AXA have made it incredibly easy. We've launched a new cross-sell tool that actually can, if you customers, if your broking partners don't have a solution, they can offer a very, very simple MLP solution on the back of only a few questions and a very clear pricing strategy. Okay, so really, really something for you to consider after this call. Right, last couple of slides, Gary. I know you've got, I think you've got one more just highlighting the different portals, the different ways that customers can access the Radar service.
So just bringing those to life then. So the online resource portal, the station, that is that library of content and knowledge. So we have over 2,000 different types of guides in there. We've already touched upon that we are sector agnostic, size of business agnostic, so that therefore the requirement for the few hundred staff that we've got inside Radar already across our different city locations is we produce the content and the guides that support all of the areas that the policy covers. That's video training, question sets, online learning, templates, guidance, etc. that businesses need. It's workflow orientated, so if somebody's asking for advice, they'll be able to click on a guide and they'll be able to see if they're at stage 3 of a TUPE process and they need to go back and make sure that stage 1 and 2 has been done, for example. But there's a wealth of material in there and over 600 different downloadable templates for businesses to be able to use and adapt or ask us to bespoke them for them. So we know that that's wider and deeper than any of the competitor sites that there are in the marketplace. And also the beauty of it is that content is created by my lawyers, barristers, former regulators, judges and others that have practiced, that are doing this still every day in the claims and the litigation process. So actually the material and the advice is created by the actual practitioners that use this in the pointy end of litigation and investigations, and might be sliding it across the desk in a caution interview the very day before. So that's part of the advantage of the material that's there. But that's the library. The risk analysis tool on the right hand side, that then shapes the risk register for the business. So whether they're a care home, whether they're a small business, medium-sized business, they can look at property risk, they can look at cyber risk, they can look at HR risk, health and safety risk, etc. It's our algorithms and our AI that sit at the back of that, so it helps people self-audit. They can download and use that tool, which then shapes the journey through that lot of content. So they actually then starts to marshal the content of the specific needs and profile and needs of each individual user for the business. Law and compliance and regulation is still vast, so that important self-risk analysis, self-auditing tool personalizes that and gives bespoke learning pathways and the right templates for businesses to use. Third thing is Grace, our legal assistant, because once the business has got content, it knows what its risks are, what it needs to work on, what it needs to do, and is accessing those templates. It needs to train its employees, support its employees. Vicarious liability is always there, so though the employer has always got to prove that the employee had access, was aware, could ask questions, was fully supported, all of the resources were available, and in a crisis could press a button and ask for support and be transferred straight to one of our crisis lawyers. So that app-based solution, Grace, carries all of that information around the business for all employees and managers to use, which gives us that defence for the body corporate in the police stations, the tribunals, etc. And then because things can still go wrong, our reporting app, Radar Report, looks at cyber breaches, environmental ESG breaches, contract breaches, health and safety breaches. It does everything from radar reports, for example, on health and safety that come to us to support the business and protect them with is the right information, content and things there. Near misses and minor incident reporting. We've created a self-help simple tool that works on our database, legally privileged, helping businesses not miss video evidence, statements, witnesses and etc. in all those breach categories. All of those tools are owned by Radar, developed by our in-house technology team, working with customers that are giving us a brief and saying, this is our problem, we need this to stop that happening again, etc. So that's just an example of customer-led initiative with technology and content working together. But if you buy the MLP solution, those tools are embedded as part of the solution and available to the client. And that's what also gives your policyholder, you guys and us, the rich data that we need to see as to how to target and properly help people and stay ahead predictively and proactively of risk issues. And I can say that all four of those tools are completely unique to us. You cannot find them in other competitor solutions. They are designed and built uniquely in this solution.
I think that's a really, really good point you make there, Gary, in terms of, because the reality is the penetration in terms of D&O and management liability across the insurance industry is still woefully low. Literally, I attended a conference last week in one of our key broking partners, and they were highlighting from their data insights, less than 10% across their network had purchased a management liability policy. Now, I'm sure you would agree with all the risks that you've heard today, actually for the cost involved, the average cost for AXA MLP is less than £800. Okay. Now, as I said, mentioned a guy earlier, starting from well under £100. Yeah. Cost versus value. There's just no comparison. Okay, the final slide, I believe, is just a thank you. And I have a couple of questions that have come in. Just flip through that, we've covered. Yeah, and there's some, I will hand back to Chris, but I have a couple of questions that have come in directly. So Chris, over to you, and then I'll answer some questions.
Yeah, I mean, just very briefly from me, so we've got time for questions. Just to kind of, if you just flick to the next slide, please. Just around the learning objectives, exactly. So look, all of those are being covered in depth, I'm sure you'll agree. On the how Radar can offer cost savings to policyholders. We've talked about claims prevention up front, how the broad cover is included as standard, flexibility. You know, there's been 4 rewrites in recent years, which is amazing. So I think that's been really well covered. The unique relationship between AXA and Radar has been covered, you know, consistently throughout. The fact that we're sitting on a call together and presenting, I think, is a lot. We're very, very close. The claims prevention ethos is essentially that it's better to avoid a claim than run one. So, but if there is a claim, there needs to be that kind of fast, efficient service in defending and handling it. And the support available to brokers. Look, I think definitely reach out to Gary if you'd like a demo. I think that the point around building something collaboratively with brokers, very much on the same page to access. So, you know, please contact us as well in that. We've got 4 minutes for questions.
Okay, the first one that's come in is a really, really good one, and it's quite a common one that we often get asked from our partners. And Gary, this is one for you. Is there a limit on the number of calls that customers can make into Radar?
No, we encourage the calls. We've certainly got our power users that would ring us morning, noon and night. We quite welcome those. We've got the advisory team is a very large team and constantly grows. So no, there isn't a limit on calls. And to actually attract those reductions in excess and those advantages, for example, if we put a barrier in place and limited that or started to charge for it, you wouldn't get the proactive engagement. And I'm aware that a number of competitors do limit. which means you can't get the support that you need to stop it being a claim in the first place. So no, there's not a limit on the calls.
Yes, thank you. And the next one's a little bit more specific, but one of our partners was asked around the Building Safety Act, which comes in April next year. Are we covering those personal approved persons that that position of responsibility? And can you give more specific advice around that act?
So do you want me to talk about the support and the services, or do you want to take it on the point?
I'll answer yes. The definition of insured covers all past, present and future director, officers and employees. We don't have to specifically mention approved persons, whether it's in financial services, whether it's in terms of that act.
Excellent. So I know we've been discussing it, so thank you for putting that confirmation on record. So the big court case, the tragic case that's at the centre of this, that's driven a lot of the changes in legislation and approach. Of course, people can see online, actually publicly, we're managing and dealing with that case. So we've been at the heart of some of these issues. There's a lot of common principles that's been attached. So competent persons, approved persons, or representative, etc. So as Callum says, it's going to be covered. So we've already got blogs, and we've already got content, and we've got posts, and we've got early warning, training and advisory support on these health and safety risks and corporate governance areas that we've been delivering now. So we constantly monitor it and update it. So expect a suite of products and tools specifically in relation to it as well. And the other thing I can mention is we have got different people in those value chains. So some of the regulatory changes are already in force. So the due diligence and the probity on the sourcing of materials, where they come from, their checks, that they are valid and competent materials to be used in building processes, etc. Those changes have already come in. So we already have content, advice, guidance across the whole website for that. But as certainty comes in about the regulator's approach and the final drafts go into committed legislation, we will be doing webinars for policyholders and webinars for MGAs and brokers that support us as well, to give early warning and guidance of yet more changes and things that we're pushing the boat out with AXA in terms of the product and cover. So yes, they're covered. Yes, there's already advice and guidance in the site, and there's more on the way. If you want to understand more about how we do that and create it, our content team and strategist Kate Gilliford can help people understand that and what the content delivery timetable is.
Thank you, Gary. That's an excellent answer. So I believe that concludes our presentation.
Thank you very much. I don't think anyone's been quite so spot on time before. So just once again, thank you to Chris, Callum and Gary, and to our MGAA Gold sponsors AXA and Radar for a very informative briefing. As I said at the top of the meeting, the recording will be available post-event along with the Survey Monkey for your feedback. I would also say please don't forget to register for the MGAA conference, 6th of July at Old Billingsgate, and of course AXA and Radar will be there to take any further questions or extend any conversations that you'd like to have as I say at the MGAA conference. Just leaves me to wish our delegates thank you very much for joining us today, and appreciate your time, and wishing you all a very pleasant and productive afternoon. Thank you very much.